My name is Ben with ASI Outdoors. I am a trained gunsmith via the Northern Alberta Institute of Technology. I've been a licensed gunsmith, and this is the information that you're going to hear about the Sks Ban potentially coming up. Welcome back, folks, to another episode of ASI Outdoors. So today I'm going to be going through the proposed ban on the gapless firearms that just came out December 4th, and also the advisory report. That was the expert advisory report that's now about a year old that just came out. They're likely going to try and ban the SKS, unfortunately, and a bunch of other firearms that are around World War II vintage and older. That are, I guess, still semi-automatic, which is pretty ridiculous. So I'm going to go through now, just word for word. You'll have this on your screen, so as I'm going through with you. Anyways, so December 4th, 2025. Today, the Honorable Gary Manisangri, Minister of Public Safety, issued the following statement. Canadians deserve to live in communities that are safe, secure, and free of firearms violence. From removing assault-style firearms from our streets to reinforce border security, our government continues to take decisive action. I am pleased to announce that the Government of Canada is taking 3 more important steps to better control firearms and protect Canadians. Protection order regulations. To protect people in at-risk situations, including situations involving gender-based or intimate partner violence, the Government of Canada is moving forward with protection order regulations as called for under former Bill C-21. This week, regulations were tabled in Parliament that would support the full implementation of the mandatory license refusal and revocation requirements brought into force in spring 2025. Engagement is ongoing. Work is actively underway to address feedback from victims, such as the inclusion of peace bonds, and to bring the regulations forward in spring 2026. So this is the one that's going to affect us as legal firearms owners. The other one's a bit muddy. You can look to some videos that Runkle have done to see kind of what that'll affect you if you haven't heard about that yet. Stronger classification requirements. We are also strengthening the firearms classification regime to make sure all makes and models of firearms are accounted for prior to entering the Canadian market. Regulatory amendments have been tabled in Parliament that would require all domestic manufacturers and importers to share technical information with the Registrar of Firearms for classification before manufacturing or importing any batch or shipment of firearm. Complementing this measure, we intend to follow through on our platform commitment to bring forward additional legislative measures to further strengthen this regime. This would ensure the correct classification of firearms by competent government authorities before they reach the Canadian market. So basically what they want to do there is, right now there's kind of there was a thing for domestic manufacturers where if they're planning to make kind of like a one-off gun that you'd make under 1,500 of, so for each model there'd be less than 1,500 in circulation, you don't have to apply for an FRT. So why they want to do this is, right now manufacturers are able to go by the letter of the law, what things are written by. For example, like when the crypto was made, that was completely followed the letter of the law. Like they completely changed the mag well, so it couldn't accept a regular Stanag style AR-15 mag. It was proprietary magazines. They were also only 5-round magazines, so it was never designed to have more than 5 rounds. But they want to basically just have it so it's like some government buddy RCMP person that they can lean into and just say, hey, look, just basically say everything's prohibited. So that's why they're trying to do that, which is just absolutely excellent. Not, but anyways. The next part here is modernizing the classification regime. taking into consideration the Mass Casualty Commission's report, advice from the Expert Advisory Panel on Firearms and industry representatives, and calls from firearms owners and firearms control advocates, the government of Canada will shortly be launching a comprehensive review of the firearms classification regime. With an emphasis on simplicity and consistency, this review will be supported by an expanded advisory group and will involve dedicated consultation with First Nations, Inuit, and Métis communities, including on the SKS, to ensure Indigenous perspectives and traditions are an active part of the process. The review will take a board view of the legal framework for firearms, devices, magazines, and ammunition to modernize the regime and ensure Canadians' safety. We will ensure that the views of Canadians are considered throughout this review. Perspectives of firearm experts, Indigenous peoples, industry, firearms owners, and hunters will be integral to its success. Based off of what I've watched with all the stuff with SecU and all the other things that went down when they actually had people that were industry experts, they did not listen to a single thing that they actually had to say. They kind of just want to work with people just so that they say they have. A lot of the things, again, like that Terry Bryant, for example, the CFO of Alberta, the things that Dr. Terry Bryant has said are all more safety-based. And these things typically aren't safety-based. They want a comprehensive review of the firearms classification, yet they just spent how much time with the amendments to C-21 that was supposed to be a handgun ban. So basically there was the amendments that created like the assault weapon thing, where any new firearms that are brought into the market had to follow these certain list of rules. If they're semi-automatic, they couldn't be designed initially to hold more than 5 rounds. So that means if you're using a magazine that's like, for example, around a Stanag magazine, like a AR style or Glock magazine, that would obviously have more capacity. They weren't going to let that one fly, so they did that. And then of course other manufacturers adapted to that and were compliant with the law, and they just decided to, make it up as they go, which is kind of how they do. And that's why they're doing what they're doing now. The reason the SKS hasn't been banned is because it is so prolific in Canada as a hunting rifle, and there's over 1 million in circulation. SKS for every legal firearms owner in Canada, which is kind of insane, but like that is probably very accurate considering they used to be about $100. I know that's crazy for people that are buying them now for like $800, but yeah, like back in the day they were like dime a dozen, and you could just literally buy a crate of them like 20 or 14 or something. It was like very common for guys to just do that. That's what the briefing says, but going into the final report from the expert advisory, which is 13 pages, I'm going to go through it. I'm not going to go through every single page because you're probably tired of me talking already. But the summary of the panel's work, so I'm just going to go through the summary, is the panel was mandated by Public Safety Canada to provide advice on firearms that remain on the market that employs semi-automatic action with sustained rapid fire capability, quote-unquote tactical military design with large capacity magazines, while identifying any that are reasonable for hunting and sport shooting purposes, and to provide guidance on associated characteristics. So they basically go through a bunch of stuff that after all the orders in council that they did, they met together. They made a gap list of firearms which they consider to be still, I guess, military style or capable of rapid fire, that are in their eyes not suitable for hunting use. Go through a bunch of stuff, going through amendments to the criminal code, So went through a bunch of stuff related to the hunting regulations per each province and how prolific each firearm was per each province, like how much it was being used actually as a hunting gun. So panel found that it recognizes and affirms the place of legal firearms in Canada and Canadian society. Indigenous peoples and settlers, Canadians have employed firearms for hunting and sport purposes for centuries. It is important that legitimate users retain the ability to legally acquire and use firearms for these purposes. ... However, the panel also believes that the interests of gun owners need to be balanced against the public safety interests of Canadians. This means that limits should be placed on the possession of use of firearms that pose substantial public safety risk because of their design and capabilities. So they're basically going to go through this whole thing, and their whole logic was that some of these things, like the SKS, can be converted with things like Tapco stocks, duckbill magazines, magwell conversions, other stuff like that. They also show figures like the Titan K78 shotgun and the Armed Striker shotgun, which you'll be seeing there. Basically shows that semi-automatic shotguns that are magazine fed are too dangerous because the most hunting regulations state that the shotgun should be plugged to 3 rounds. So their logic is, if you only are supposed to have 3 rounds and the semi-auto, why do you need something that's magazine fed that could even hold potentially more than 5 rounds if you were able to get a magazine that had that? Shotguns specifically with that are magazine fed, once they get past like 10 rounds, like the thing's like 3 friggin' feet long because it takes so much to actually get the thing to curve in with a 12 gauge was never meant to be magazine fed. So their logic is that because there's plugs in most shotguns that are for waterfowl, things like that, they're only limited to 3 rounds. That why should you have these shotguns that are tactical style with mag-fed limits capable of 5 and above, is their logic, even though nobody would have one that would be able to fire more than 5, as that would be prohibited. And then they also examined a bunch of military firearms from the Second World War, and they also go through a bunch of stuff like the M1 carbine, which has since been banned, and the SVT 40, which is a Russian semi-automatic gun that's from the Second World War. It's like things like 5 friggin' feet long. Even, I don't know, the thought of somebody using that for the purposes described in this is kind of laughable, but you know what? These people don't really get out much, so I don't really put it past them. But they're basically saying in the mid-1990s, after the fall of the Cold War countries, that there was a lot of these Russian semi-automatic pop style guns that ended up in the market and flooded the market, and that's why all these people use them prolifically as hunting rifles. Not that they were actually good for hunting, even though realistically an SKS is quite honestly the modern version of a Winchester lever action 30-30. So it's like the modern version of being John Wayne. I mean, you look at it, the ballistic capabilities, also 30 caliber. It's very, very, very comparable, very similar. It's no wonder that they're so popular for hunting and that they're used by Indigenous communities. I mean, Indigenous people are actually using these things to feed themselves. If it wasn't capable as a hunting rifle, they wouldn't be using it because they wouldn't be able to sustain themselves as sustenance hunters. Yeah, so then they go and just say that the SKS, of course, how it can be converted with these different style of stocks and things like that, and how maybe they should get rid of the magazine, basically the magazine fed versions of, and just have the ones that ride on stripper clips with the original design. Then there's a couple other random guns they threw in there, like the LF-57 submachine gun, and unique or unusual firearms, basically random ones that are still available. Yeah, the Maz 1944, 1949, and 1956. So those are still available right now. One of the only ones on this list, actually, that you can still get with the SKS. So that's a semi-automatic French gun that was, I don't know, used in the 50s, late 40s, and kind of a bunch of different variants there. Used like a 10-round magazine, of course, now pinned to 5. Some of them were converted to 308. Some of them use like a 7.5 millimeter French. They're like $4,500 each. Even if you want to bring them in from somewhere like the States, you're still going to be spending a big chunk of change. So it's not like they're easy to come by or they're like on every store shelf. And then it goes through a bunch of stuff that they want to go through, the stuff with the Indigenous people, the white savior syndrome, them, and they want to give them, make sure that the Indigenous people that are hunters are given compensation for their SKSs, so that if they decide to ban them, that they can buy hunting rifles, as they are #1 priority. They don't want to have any pistol caliber centerfire semi-autos anymore either. They want it only to be fed by a traditional magazine and a traditional rifle caliber, because people are using Glock magazines and they don't want there to be the loophole for the 10 round of 9mm, which again, if you actually know anything about ballistics, I would much rather get shot with a 9mm than a 5.56 or 7.62 by 39, 308, 30-06, 270. Pick your pick. Again, this is all just going back to, they really have nothing else going for them right now. Our country is quite honestly on the brink of collapse. They don't enforce anything to do with anything in this country. Immigration, taxes, law, they let you do whatever you want. If you are a legal gun owner, though, they're gonna make your life a living hell, and they don't want you to have any money, and they don't want to have to pay you. So that's the other thing too, is we'll see what happens with this thing in Saskatchewan, because if they decide to ban the SKS, and that sets precedent, there's 1 million of them. So you even say at the current rate of $800 each, so $800 million. You got 1 million SKSs, $800 each. That is gonna end up being 800 million. Add all the government bureaucracy, probably going to be about $3,000 each. $3,000 a piece. So you're going to have these SKSs that are $3,000 a piece, that people are, using for hunting, sustenance, other stuff like that. At the end of the day, they don't really want us to have any gun at all. The one thing I will say is, though, there's some fuds out there that don't completely know what's going on. If you piss off the people who own SKSs, oh my good lord, you've literally pissed off so many people by doing that one move. If you guys do that, even if you go ahead and try and roll back the thing like the Tapco stocks or the duckbill banks, like, holy potatoes, like, it is culturally significant to our country, almost more culturally significant to our country than the Ross rifle or the Lee Enfield. It's the same thing. It's like saying, oh, the Lee Enfield was once a military rifle and has a potential high rate of fire with the Mad Minute or whatever, so we're gonna have to ban that one next. I can already tell that's probably what they're gonna go for. I don't know what to say. Ultimately, this is just another, I would say, nail in the coffin, but it's actually more a nail in their coffin, because the more stupid stuff like this they keep doing, grandstanding on the graves of people like, you know, Pauly Sevigny and all whatever they're doing constantly. Yeah, it just goes to show that it's not actually based in any form of fact or reason. They're just making it up as they go, which is, I don't know if it isn't apparent yet for people, but it is quite apparent for myself. The unfortunate thing about the whole Sks ban here too, with them targeting potentially Indigenous communities, is they're likely gonna give them a pass, similar to like the Valmet. It's a variant of the AK-47. It's the only variant of the AK-47 that is still legal in Canada even now, because it was actually gifted to the First Nations communities as a suitable hunting rifle, and is even now still used as a hunting rifle. Its value is up to even $10,000 because it is one of the last variants that is still legal, and it is still in non-restricted status. But it goes to show their logic is flawed and is based solely in the lens of a woke kind of mind, so they can't even think of things of just black and white. They have to always bend the rules to their own personal political beliefs, or to gain some form of credit that they can lean back on later with communities for votes. It's again their whole divide and conquer strategy, which is what they're known for. I could very well see them also just saying people can keep the ones they have, potentially putting them in restricted status, because there's only currently about 14 in the whole country that are in restricted status, meaning that they only know where 14 of these things are. They could be within any number of places that legal PAL owners can own them, because even now it is the most popular rifle, I would say, that people buy as a first gun, because it is so versatile. It's such a good rifle to learn on, and also ammunition is cheap. There's lots of surplus ammunition available even now, coming from markets like China, and those can often be also non-corrosive, so you don't have the same issues that you had before back in the day. Yeah, hard to really beat, so that's why it's so popular. I would suggest you go pick one up if you haven't already. Again, I've worked with some other people before. The most prolific importer, I would say, is firearms, so if you want to pick one up, might be a good starting point. Of course, nothing is for sale on this platform, and that's just kind of an honorable mention. Breton buyback, that was the initial kind of test phase that they were doing, absolutely failed miserably. They're not likely going to stop there. If they only got about 29 guns back, 22 guns back, something like that, not looking good for them, but we're just gonna have to hold the line, boys. So hold the line, and I'd like to also announce that I've updated my page with a membership. So I have a membership available, I believe, for $4.49, and that membership is going to cover a couple of different things, like early access to videos, also hunting tips, like how to hunt videos. So I'm going to have a bunch of stuff there that's kind of behind a member's paywall. You're going to get to see videos a day early, things like that. And then I'll also shortly, in the next week or so, have merch coming out. Look for that link too for my merch section. And I will have some quality hoodies I'm working right now, not just some crap that's like Etsy or something. Like, this is actually gonna be decent stuff that you guys would want to wear, stuff that I personally would want to wear. There's not a lot of good men's clothing out there. It's kind of all kitschy or feminine, so besides wearing like a Carnard jacket around everywhere, I'd like to see some other options for people. So also like and subscribe, guys. Appreciate that, and hit me up in the next one. Hopefully I got some good news for you guys coming soon, but we will see what happens. Peace.